Welcome to this journey where we dialogue with thought and heart leaders to share their reflections on human condition and how to improve them.
Today we have with us Dr. Mickra Hamilton. Mickra, a highly decorated retired colonel, spent 30 years in the United States Air Force Reserves as a systems strategist and human performance subject matter expert. Leveraging this experience, she works with a complex systems approach for data-driven precision to optimize human potential. Mickra is also the co-founder and the CEO of Our Apeiron Zoh Corporation, a precision performance ecosystem that curates limitless expression. Mickra speaks internationally on the focus areas of epigenetics of human environment, breathing science, conscious leadership, and peak performance.
Here we go, Mickra. Thank you so much for this wonderful grace from you to be available, to be present here, and to be open to deep dive in a very spontaneous manner on some of the issues that touch our lives. Thank you so much.
It's certainly my pleasure. It's an honor to be here. I'm very excited to chat with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickra. So, Mickra, I think we should start with the thing that has gripped the entire world right now, and people are trying to make sense of it. I've heard a lot of sane people who are deep thinkers, avoiding any kind of opinions and, or maybe just saying things with humility. How are you making sense of the current evolving situation?
Well, the way I make sense of COVID-19 is really the way I make sense of everything else. And it's simple. This is an experience that we're all having. And in this experience, it's actually global and collective, as opposed to, being regional or being countrywide or being one culture. It's the entire human species having an experience together. And so as I look at COVID-19, I always look at everything from a perspective of what evolutionary gifts are we giving ourselves, right? It is no coincidence or mistake that nature has created this virus. We don't do things randomly, right? With everything being on purpose, you ask, what is the benefit of this virus? What is the gift, or gifts plural? Because it's certain that our genetics are designed to assist us to thrive and to evolve as a species, as a human species. And so COVID-19 for me is a catalyst for evolution. And what shall we do with it then becomes the next question.
Interesting. You mentioned gift and you mentioned catalyst for evolution. And since a lot of your work has been at the cutting edge of understanding what makes human, and looking at the different paradigms and different factors in a systemic way, is there any way where you can nuance what you just said in terms of, here we are confronted with this gift, as you mentioned, but a lot of people right now, or let me rephrase. I think people are on a spectrum of seeing or receiving this. Yes. So a lot of people are not seeing this as a gift. A lot of people are not receiving this as a gift. How would you try to explain that being also a reality?
The fact that people are suffering is a very real reality. There's no discounting or denying that. It's interesting as we all move through this. The gift to me is the stillness that we have access to if we choose to abide in it. And what I mean by that is this. we have become a species of doers. We go, we strive, we seek, we achieve, we are on, what many call the hamster wheel. We're in many ways unaware and mindless, and that's an okay thing. When we're given an opportunity like COVID to move into stillness, and we basically shut down the world, so to speak, and in the isolation allows us now new habits, new routines, new opportunities to have a different experience, a forced experience, right? How many people would actually slow down and do life differently if not being forced to do so? So the gift is in the ability to have a novel environment. Novelty equals the potential for transformation and change. So there's the gift. Now, when we look on the suffering side and we say there are people dying, yes, there are people dying. There will always be people dying. Now, this is a bit harsh and you would say quick, and yet it's not. I mean, you look at history and what history has brought over time from a pandemic perspective. It's the latest in, right, many. We have lived in a society, or in a world time where things are, compared to all of human history, relatively easy. It's remarkable when you look at what we have access to, and yet we're moving into a state of disease and decline and decay in the human system that can't hold up under natural occurrences. Right, and so we have this natural occurrence that comes in, and can the human interact with it? Can the human survive and thrive through this new experience? And the answer is many on this planet cannot. We've I think moved out of our ability to, I say be anti-fragile, Nassim Taleb's anti-fragile concept, to be robust and to encounter anything that comes along. Our immune systems have weakened to the point, based on our lifestyles, right, to the point where we can't really robustly, agilely adapt to what comes down the evolutionary pipeline. And so it's interesting, about the suffering. Yes, there's suffering, and in the suffering there's an opportunity to create changes where we take sovereign responsibility for our health, for our well-being, for how we show up in this experience, and then make the decisions to do it differently. That requires that fear leave the scaffolding, right? It requires that we understand that we're more than a frail, tiny human. It requires that we understand that in our essence, we are eternal. And once we know those things, once we know them, not think about them, once we know them, then each moment is an opportunity for presence, for choice, for building stronger immune systems, for building stronger planetary systems that allow us to interact more precisely with our human system, and also our relational dynamics with those around us, our families, our communities, and then the greater ecosystem of the planet that actually hosts our life. So, right, I just see it as all of it, such a beautiful benefit. I don't see the detractors.
Interesting. And Mickra, how's your work connected with the potential that you see in this?
Our work, we have Apeiron Zoh is the corporation, and it means limitless life in Greek. And, we know that the human system and this experience is limitless. And so as we look at it through a complex systems lens of how everything interacts and interrelates and isn't stovepiped. The human is not separate from all of creation. The human lives in relationship with the planet that supports and sustains our life. And so from a, to get, I guess, very granular to answer your question, it's this. In our corporation, we have an ecosystem that teaches that the human system is complex, that all of the parts and pieces work together in a symphony or an orchestra, and that is informed by everything that we do, take into our bodies, and that's epigenetics. So we say, okay, how to create a truly anti-fragile human system that evolves on purpose, as opposed to a random belief in evolution. How do we do that? And the way to do that is to fundamentally redefine what the human system is and does, right, in the experience. And so it's somewhat like, we've got this body, mind, spirit concept, but even that is limited, right? We're one human system where all of the players can play together. So if I have a team, and I have the team of my physical body itself, I have my mental constructs, I have my emotional sort of players that are helping me from a sensory perspective do all of this. And then I have my spiritual components of what am I? Who am I? Beyond my role as doctor, colonel, CEO, all of those things, fundamentally and foundationally, who am I? And so if we look at the human system that way, and we move out of the reductionistic kind of science thing of a pill for an ill, or a symptom gets a targeted resolution. If we say, why is that symptom there to begin with? So get to the root of what's causing the disruption in the system, and then very precisely in this new era of precision data, very precisely go in, get to that root cause, send that ripple across the entire system so that the system moves into an integrated alignment. That's what we have to do first before the human system can heal or move into resonance or thriving and flourishing. And then we've got to do the same thing with all of the systems, because all of our systems are looking through the same lens that we look at medicine through the human system. So it has to be not just how this human interacts, but how all of the systems interact with the human and rate that bi-directional flow.
Interesting. I think it was 1942, probably the year when, for the first time, the word epigenetics came on the scene, if I'm not mistaken. And from then on, there have been continuous strides being made to understand this more. And if I were to extend this, within science itself, we see that concepts are constantly being challenged, and causalities and correlations are constantly being challenged. And that's how science progresses. You actually do not look at science, but you look at science of the day. Now, in within that, there lies this dilemma of knowing certain thing in terms of, so even within a system, let's say, you define certain parts and the relationship between the parts in some sense, and the feed-forward, feedback mechanisms. But then over a period of time, you do realize that, those parts have certain other underlying or overlay kind of mechanisms. How do you deal with this thing of knowing only a bit and working with it, and yet being open to so much more to be discovered?
And that's a wonderful question. I love that, because it brings what I'd call both the science and the sacred, or you could say science and spirituality, or science and consciousness together. And they are one and the same, right? And so it's interesting, one we think we can prove and the other we can't. And so I think it's the and both. We must have the and both, not the either or. The dualistic nature of the good, bad, black, white, it's simply limiting, right? That's more of a linear kind of thing. And so if I look at epigenetics, and I just love that we're now in a place where both on the science side and the spiritual consciousness side, people are talking about what that means. Now, epigenetics, very simply put, is it's above the genes. So the genes are our blueprint. It's hardwired. It doesn't change. Short of mutation, doesn't change. The stunning and beautiful thing about our ability to change comes through epigenetics. So above the genes, or how nature and nurture interact. So everything in the environment is an input to this system, every single thing. There's nothing that doesn't affect my system. And my DNA, moment by moment, really millisecond by millisecond, is sampling everything. I'm this brilliant creation that is constantly sampling its environment and making decisions based on what I'm perceiving from my sensory system and the environment. So we know that we can measure that. Right. So from a scientific perspective, we can look at methylation and we can see how things out here affect what's going on in my physicality. Now, the things that we can't measure are, let me go back and say, we talk about epigenetics like with Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and the people who go, look, there's so much more here than just the physicality. We also have energy moving all the time in form. So emotions, energy in motion. Now, one would think that you couldn't validate that from a scientific perspective, and yet you can. So what we can do is we can put sensors on the body, on the autonomic nervous system, and we can look at, what does that nervous system say about the way we've lived our lives? Have we been stressed? Are we chronically stressed? Are we too relaxed? Right? The body likes to be in a place of homeostasis. But we can put those on and we can actually challenge the system. So we can have the person talk about the most blissful, awe-inspiring experience they've ever had, and we can record what happens in their nervous system. We can also then ask them, what was the most stressful thing that you've ever encountered? And simply by them remembering it and talking about it, we can see how much of that experience is still trapped in the physicality, right? It comes through the mind, but it's trapped in the physicality. So we can actually measure the thoughts in the mind and the subsequent emotional and feeling states of the body. So this is where the science is going to bridge the gap into the unseen or unknown, right? And there's no question that everything we think, the emotional structures that we choose to engage in, whether it's anger, rage, victim consciousness of betrayal, abandonment, or it's love and connectedness, harmony, joy, peace, right? Those are all spectrums of emotion that create feeling states in the body. And we know that those are tied to chemistry. So if I'm joyful and in love, my oxytocin is flowing, my dopamine and serotonin is beautifully being generated, and I'm connected and thriving. If I'm angry and you are an other, and I'm going to make sure that you don't take advantage of me, very different chemistry is flowing, and my state of perception and my way of being in the world is very separate. And so epigenetics, it allows us to really take the inputs, look at how they're affecting the system, and then what is the outcome. And I'll say that one of the most important things when it comes to epigenetics is how we are passing our current state of experience down through the generational lines, through our ancestry. What's come before us? How do we propagate that in our own experience and send it into our children and send it down the lines? So it's to me, a moral and ethical responsibility for us to look at our behaviors, to be in awareness and presence of them. Where did they come from, right? We can see them from our families and our cultural editors and influencers. And then in that awareness, what do we do with them? Because we can now, this is exciting, we have preconception planning programs where we work with precision data. We prepare the mother and the father to conceive. And they're prepared not just physiologically through their DNA, but they're prepared through their stress mechanisms, through their brain, and how their brain is interacting. And they're prepared. I think say the word spiritually to connect in with this life that they're choosing to create and bring into form. Now, when the baby is born, now we have more information. We have the data of those two parents combining, making this new life, and we can very precisely program, and I don't mean program in a negative way, in the way we've always done it, but precisely program the evolution of that being. Now, that child can be raised in awareness of it's simply, we're here for an experience. It isn't we're bad, we're wrong, we're going to die addled and broken. We're here for an experience, and when it's time to transition out of this experience, we will gratefully go on to what is next in store for us. Right? So if we can begin to consciously parent and not shut them down, not program them up in the ways we think that they need to be, not plan their entire life before they even come out of the womb, and then run them around on that hamster wheel again to strive and achieve. They know how to be human beings. And so we have an opportunity to really purposefully propel evolution. It's stunning.
Interesting. I'm fascinated by the way you try to, or in your practice you weave in the known and the unknown, the manifest and the unmanifest, and science and spirituality. How has been your experience of taking the vocabulary of spirituality into the settings that you are a part of? Because you're a part of military establishment in some sense, and you've been working with corporate as well. And both of these establishments, they have a certain way in which they function. They have a certain philosophy with which that functions. How's been your experience of taking this there?
I'm going to just turn this off. Something is beeping. I'm so sorry.
No issue.
Let's see. Oh, I can't get it off. Okay. What's interesting about the question that you ask, I've spent 30 years, right, in a very, what I call a very dense and grounded culture. And, it's interesting because it's a culture of protect and serve, or protect and defend. And so everything is kind of indoctrinated and programmed into a very specific lens. That lens is a grounded lens that has no room, in most cases, for anything esoteric, for anything that is unknown, that is questionable. Right? So it's been fascinating over the years to really precisely use my language to speak to each individual and each culture as a precision entity. So we certainly are not going to be talking about spiritual aspects in the military, except to say that everyone has a purpose. Military people generally serve because they want to assist others. and it's not across the board, but right, it's generally they're warriors with honor, or they want to be warriors with honor. And so I think it's a masterful thing to be able to look into a culture or look into a corporate organizational entity or even a global organization and see what it is that they need to actually hear, see, and know in their own way of receiving, so that they can lay in things for their culture. This is where we've had a bit of hubris as humans, going into other cultures and thinking that we know what they need. Do you hear my words? We know what they need. It's wow, it's really naive, right? Because we can't even imagine what they need because we haven't taken the time to actually know them, right? And so it's interesting now in the time of precision, where just as our DNA is unique, the 0.1% that makes us unique, all of the cultural belief systems and value systems make those cultures unique. And so as we know those things, and we really connect and interrelate through their lens, not through our projected lens, then we're able to really create change together. Because the individual cultures, the individual systems have to want change because they want it. And they have to know that that change that's being potentially recommended is going to work for them. And then they get passionate about it. And then they make it happen, right? Not somebody coming in from the outside telling them what to do and making it happen.
Interesting. Yeah. I want to stay with this particular aspect a little bit more, because it's in some sense, as you were mentioning and helping us understand epigenetics, it's an expression of the gene in some sense, and in interaction with the environment, and it responds to the environment in some sense, and which means the environment, which is political, economic, social in some sense, has an important role to play in enabling or disabling the expression of the gene and the individual. And because military or political establishments are an important player in this, how have you evolved your own thinking around it? Because we find ourselves right now, after the World War II, the last 70 plus years of different strides that we've made in political arena, in geopolitical arena, in industry, in technology. How have you been thinking about this? Because your own work is so very profound, and then you connect, and then you're trying to interact with these leaders and institutions which are trying to create the environment. How have you been thinking about it?
I think about it the way I think about everything else, right? It's a fundamental perception of how everything interrelates, feeds in and out, these feedback loops. And, oh, goodness.
No worries.
I'm so sorry. And when I look at all of it through the complex system. I say, okay, how does the environment impact this? How does policy impact this? How do resources, finances impact this? And in particular, it's not even in particular. If we look at the military and we look at politics, at the foundation, when all of these things were first founded, they were truly founded on a very beautiful, I think, underpinning, right, of we want to ensure freedoms. We want to promote human rights, And, I sense that what's happened with it is the more we've separated from our inner self, our inner presence, the more we've separated from the planet, the more we've gone into the I lens as opposed to the we lens. Now it's I'm right and you're wrong, and this party knows more than this party, and they're all fighting, and fighting doesn't bring any kind of beautiful systems change, right? It just keeps going back and forth, and it's exhausting, really. And so, if we move to a complex systems lens and look at the whole and look at the we versus the I, and how do these systems promote thriving in the human system, which then the human system thriving is more creative and innovative and gives back and isn't in fear and greed, right? How do all the systems on the planet look different? In politics in particular, politics is about ideas. It's not about greed and money, right? And so, politicians really do want good ideas. They want change because nobody goes into I don't know. Maybe some people go into politics for their ego, but generally you don't step into a leadership role unless you really want to help. Right? At some level, there is a desire to help. And so I think that, we've got all of these ideas about how these systems are not helping us. Well, complaining about it is creating angst in the system, and also in this human system, more separatist energy. For me, I like the lens of neutral, like the body it thrives in homeostasis. And that's a very narrow window of balance. I think that, this COVID opportunity has created a window of perception for everyone to recognize that we've been a bit complacent, that we've had this idea that things like this can't happen to us in a modern age. And when we look at the modern conveniences that we've created, and the disruption to both the human system and the planetary system, it assists us to go, okay, what do we need to do to thrive in the face of anything that comes down the evolutionary pipeline? And so politics, financial systems, now have this opportunity to look at, wow, we weren't at all prepared for this, and if this continues, which, you will see this, we will have at least a 2-year impact from this until we rebalance, and maybe not even rebalance, but create new ways of being with this new experience. People really don't want to live in discomfort. They like their cushy life experience, which is great. We have modern conveniences that are astounding. And at the same time, there are people living on the planet who don't have the basic needs. I think we can no longer look away or think that that doesn't affect us, because we see quite clearly that all of life is affected by all of the inputs. And so it will be interesting to see how leadership from both a political and also a military humanitarian perspective, how they look at the new opportunities to create new systems and not simply try to change the old ones that have not served us in, let's say, 40 years.
Interesting. I felt so much of resonance in what you said, Mickra. I should also bring in a couple of quotes here. So I was speaking with a gentleman who's a veteran educator, His name is Dr. Pradeep Khanwala in India. So India has a lot of very good institutions, education institution. So one of them is a business school called Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. It's a place called Ahmedabad in India. And this gentleman was a director in that institute. And I happened to speak with him some days back. And I asked him what is the one concept of one word that he feels we need to relook at. And he said competition. And then last week I was listening to this podcast by Eric Weinstein, who's managing partner of Peter Thiel's venture. Um, and Eric is a wonderful thinker. He's also perhaps one of the guys who founded the intellectual dark web, the IDW that people say. I mean, the whole idea being that can we have a very different kind of thinking to make sense of the paradigm. And recently he had a guest called Daniel Schmachtenberger, and both of them were talking about the the fallacy of the rivalrous system that we have created, and that's exactly what you're pointing out. This fighting, this constant fighting and jostling, mindless or reflexive, not reflective. It's so wonderful that you're thinking, and these are the so many people are thinking the same line. Um, at the heart of this is going to be a very important thing of how do we not compete, and yet we want better innovation, yet we want certain things to be better, in the sense, we want the suffering to be less, we want the people who do not have the basic needs to be provided for in a very innovative manner. um, where do you draw your optimism from that this might be accomplished in our lifetime, if at
Well,
all?
I'm going to say that it will be accomplished in our lifetime, and we're already moving far down the road to that view, to that vision, to that new expression of human living. You know, it's really interesting when you look at competition to collaboration, moving from competition to collaboration. When we are whole, when our human system is whole, and we are in touch with our inner presence, and people call this so many different things, right? Our essence, our soul, our spirit, whatever, however people define the internal nature, the presence within. When we are there, the fear of not having enough, or the fear that you're going to take what I have, is not present, because what we are can't be taken away. It can't be compromised. It can't be victimized. Right now the consciousness of the planet looks through a very fear-based lens, and it's what drives all war, right? We go, oh, they've got that and we want that, and so and same in our daily lives. We look at what other people have enviously, and we want it. So, the ability to go internal, to be still with self, and to move into, I'm going to say, love and unity, is accessible to everyone on this planet, every single human being. It's accessible. It's a choice, right? It's a choice to choose connection and love and collaboration and co-creation over competition, greed, and desire for more at the cost of others, right? So I think that the answer lies in moving from the I to the we. It doesn't mean that I don't remain an individual with desires that drive me to make a difference, to create change. It simply means that my focus goes more to everything along with myself, right? So I'm sovereign in and of myself. I love the being that I am, the essence that I am, my contributions to my life experience. And as we all begin to look more through that lens, this is why volunteerism is such a beautiful thing. It's why finding passion and purpose can make a difference. We're then able to follow that vector in a very pointed way. You know, if I drop into it, the sleeping unawareness, and find myself to be separate from you, I can very quickly wake up and realize that I'm not. We are the same. It doesn't matter the color of our skin or our gender or our culture. We're the same. There's only one human species, at least so we think, right? And so it's really taking our lens that is eye-centric and really peeling it out to the 60,000 foot view, or even further out. What are we as a human species? How can we collaborate, connect, interrelate, and interact so that we are creating new systems? Right? New systems that look through this lens, as opposed to, I got to get mine and you're going to pay because I'm going to just take it. Right? It just, you look at these two things and you go, okay, clearly that isn't working. And we've shown ourselves that for long enough. So how about we do it differently this time?
Interesting. You mentioned some very interesting keywords there. You know, love, connection, we, collaboration. In your work, in your experience, have you seen these manifestations of these by people? In what sense or in what ways do they impact the genetic expression and aid the flourishing of the human rather than the otherwise? Have you seen that happen?
Oh, of course, and this is what I can't think of his name. Bruce Lipton, and all of those guys working with the epigenetics of spirit, basically. This is what they roll in the craniate heart math. You know, this is what they're all working toward, is to validate the fact that the unseen affects the seen, right? We know in the human body that when we're in love, the oxytocin, the trust hormone, the love and connection hormone flows. We know that serotonin and dopamine go up. We know that hormones thrive and we feel connected. There's no question about that. We know that the more elevated emotional states cause those things to happen in the human system. And so, you know, you look at a puppy or you look at the baby goats in their pajamas dancing, and you're just filled with joy and innocent like a child, right? That chemistry is youthful chemistry, and it promotes thriving in the human system. That thriving does not allow disease state to set in. Right. This is where the higher vibrational emotions really make a difference. And people say, get in a high vibration. Well, it's a feeling state of connectedness. And then that chemistry flows through this exquisite human system. And all of the signals say thriving, evolving, changing, growing, nourished, nurturing. When we have the opposite of that, the separatist anger and hate and warlike competition, it's exactly the opposite, and it will create destruction in the human system itself and in the human experience. And we all know that at the core of our being. We just simply haven't really gone into this complex systems lens to look at it this way. It's a linear, kind of in the weeds thing of, I want that and I'm going to go get it, right? Daniel Schmachtenberger, and we're friends with him. We actually are the medical directors for Neurohacker, the collective that he has. And, you know, they're really creating a movement to open windows of perception to people so that they can begin to just take a different view. You go, oh, I never really thought about it or looked at it that way. It's in no way meant to polarize people into anger and berating the systems, right? It's how can we create beautiful, life-empowering change in all of these systems. So I just love what's happening.
Interesting. In some sense, if we there are various ways in which we can look at the world and try to create buckets of categorization in some sense. Suppose that the buckets were like there are a set of people who are still struggling for the basic needs. There are a set of people who have the basic needs, but they're struggling with the psychological, emotional, social connections. There are people who are leaders and they're just busy in their next achievements, the next ambition. And your work is so pertinent for all of them. How are you taking your work to? Are you taking your work to all of them, or how are you choosing to take your work to?
Well, we are taking the work to all systems. And so right now we're close. We're not complete, but we're close. We're writing them. It's basically a manifesto, and it's the new generation global complex systems precision health model, right? It's not a medicine model. It's a precision health model that actually prepones the system, right? It allows us to ensure that the system doesn't go into decline and disease. Then we don't have the suffering. We don't have the pull of financial resources that are going to 20% of the population who are chronically ill, right? All of those resources can then be directed, right, to other avenues. We can partner with private industry and government organizations, international bodies, to ensure that all humans on this planet have the foundation for thriving health and well-being. And that's in the mental space as well. Right? All of our resources are going to the broken, when if we didn't have the broken, where would the resources go? They would go to improving all aspects of life, to raising the consciousness, the health consciousness of our entire planet. Once the consciousness is raised, there is not a possibility that we will allow people to suffer and die in horrific ways, to be abused. We won't allow it. Right now, there's a lot of allowing going on because there's still a lot of fear base. And so we're writing the book. We are going to be more and more on platforms to government, to Department of Defense. In the 30 years I was there, the last few years, they really began to listen about the total environmental health impact of everything, about epigenetics, about human performance. And I see those systems making the decision to pivot into human performance as opposed to away from suicide, away from sick, away from depletion, right? If we're all focused on thriving and flourishing, everything changes quickly, right? The education is in a different slant. It's not how do we prevent disease, it's how do we thrive and flourish, right? So we've got it on that lane. we're going to globally, and we have been, but we're going to really globally begin to partner in with organizations who want the same thing, who see the same thing, and that power together is really going to create rapid change across those systems. Now, on the medical side in particular, so we have precision performance centers. You might call them medical centers, but they're so far beyond medicine, right? We train epigenetic precision performance coaches. They're doctors and they're not doctors, right? They're every specialty because it's a epigenetic precision lifestyle-based strategy, right? When we promote thriving in the system the way it's designed to, its intelligent design says it will thrive. We know all of that already. But when we actually do all of those things, the human system, self-aware, self-heals, right? And so we know that we're off course before disease states set in. And going interior and saying, oh, that's a little bit out of alignment, let me pull it back to its alignment. Then we don't have disease, we don't have cancers, we don't have the suffering that we have. And so, and on the military side of it, we have a nonprofit foundation that works with complex systems PTSD resolution. The way we've been looking at mental health is fractionated, fractured. It's looking at the psyche alone. We cannot look at the psyche alone, and we cannot talk about what's in the thinking mind to restore balance to the human system. And so complex systems trauma resolution is available. Think about this. What would happen if we took trauma in the human system offline, right? If we released the prisoners, so to speak, that are trapped within the human system based on challenging life experiences. And we learned how to regulate those experiences in real time so that we didn't trap them. Then there would be nothing to resolve 10, 20, 30 years later as we're finally able and willing to address it, right? So I think that not only can we restore balance to the human system from the traumatized state, but we can also ensure that it doesn't stand up in the human system moving forward in the evolutionary process. And that's about teaching, right? That's about restoring and then teaching and restoring and teaching. It's a constant ongoing evolutionary process. It's so the medical systems too, right? We want to have the medical systems institutionalize, internalize a new way of being. The Greeks knew how to do this. The Indians knew how to do this, right? Participatory consciousness, living in one with our environment, knowing that we are not separate from it. We must bring a new participatory consciousness to this current experience. And I think that's the sure way to create the change that we would like to see across our global ecosystem.
Interesting. As I was listening to you, I think you would agree to.
Oh, I've lost your audio. I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah. As you were saying, something was emerging inside, and I believe you would agree with what I'm going to say. Much as we are part of this whole system, the planetary system, and the whole of existential system in some sense, and as we are trying to get better at something, there are other species trying to get better at something, and there is some form of competition inbuilt in the natural system, though at the level of the nature, the level of the planet itself, there might be a whole, but within the different species there are these adaptation challenges. What I hear you say is not that we will not have these adaptation matches going on between species, what we have to be aware of is and evolve towards is to see what are man-made scarcities and man-made sufferings to each other, and how we can dial them down in a creative, collaborative, innovative manner, and ensure that whenever we are hit by something like what we're being hit right now, we have a better anti-fragility to respond to it.
Yes.
You would, okay, brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, I love anti-fragility. We actually have created a course, and it's for individuals and corporations and governments actually to begin to get this new mindset of anti-fragility. And so, just for the listeners, Nassim Taleb wrote a book, Anti-Fragile, but he used anti-fragile because we know what fragile is. We know what a system in decay, decline, broken, and crumbling means. But there is, the opposite is anti-fragility, right? And so it's a robustness of the systems. It's way beyond, we talk about resiliency, and resiliency generally means to most people, I'm going to bounce back. Well, okay, but if you started in a place that's already fractured and you bounce back to that fractured place, you're still fractured, right? If we look at it through the lens of anti-fragility and robustness, not only will I bounce back, I will become stronger. I will create an adaptive capacity that allows me in the next iteration of whatever the experience is, it allows me to thrive, not just to survive. We're not here to survive. I mean, what we're capable of is limitless. And we have this mindset that, I've got to survive. No, right? We're exquisite. We're limitless. And when we thrive, we can begin to tap into our limitless nature. But it takes a complete flip of our perceptual lens of what it means to get by, right? It's not about getting by. It's about having such an incredible experience that every day you're excited to get up, to contribute, to see what miraculous, novel, cool thing are going to come your way.
Interesting. And towards the end, Mickra, any comments you would like to close this on? Anything that you would like to add to what you said, or?
I think for me right now, as I look at what is the most exquisite thing in my life, what's stunning, and what am I grateful for? It's this expanding awareness that we're all experiencing. It's the catalyst of change and a new presence that I'm inhabiting that I've not had access to before. And I would say that each and every one of us are having this same experience. We may not be defining it like that, but we're all going through this together. And if we will each move into our inner stillness, into our inner presence, and you can do that through the breath. You can do a very measured breath of 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, very small volume, but where there are no pauses. You can get into a beautiful presence that when in that beautiful presence, how remarkable life is. If we can all move more and more into presence and inner stillness, we know how to do it. We don't need someone to tell us. We don't need a manual of how to be human, right? But it's entered through that lens of inner presence and stillness. And to do that, you have to be in silence. Whether that's a walk in nature, whether it's meditating, sitting on a mat, whether it's that you've entrained your brain with technology into a still place. We all know how to find that silence. It's just, do we want to? So it would be, I would share, let's find the stillness, the inner presence within, and have it be the guide. Instead of the external things that we're looking to for advice, the systems, leadership telling us what to do. Let's be sovereignly responsible and know what we think about things, not what other people have taught us to think about things. I think in that place, we will definitely make the changes that we would like to see made and live a new human expression in partnership with the planet. We won't take more than we need, because in nature, animals take what they need. They don't gorge. So thank you so much for that question.
Thank you, Mickra. And now I know that what's behind this doctor, this colonel, this CEO. And I'm so thankful and grateful for your wonderful candor and insight and so human conversation. Thank you so much, Mickra. Thank you so
Thank you. Happy day.
much. Happy day.